take the house, the savings, and the pension. You can just go into a home." These were my husband's final words after 37 years of marriage. Instead of valuing my efforts after years of raising kids, caring for parents, and working hard, he left me feeling miserable. I wonder what the last 37 years were even for. He just went out drinking while leaving everything to me. He never appreciated what I did, never thanking me once. I can't believe I tolerated this for 37 years. I must say I'm quite proud of myself. But from now on, I'm going to enjoy my life. It's time for him to experience some hardship. My name is Emma Watson. I'm 65 years old and work part-time at a food company's factory. My husband, John Watson, is 67. We met through a friend when I was 28, and this year was our 37th anniversary. Our friends encouraged us to date after several group outings, which were popular back then. After meeting a few times, we felt if we were to marry, it would be to each other. Getting married just seemed like the natural next step. When we started living together, it turned out he had no savings. We shared a small apartment, and I mainly covered the living expenses since John's salary was low. Worried about our future, I kept my job and continued working, sometimes missing out on household chores due to overtime. "You're late. I'm starving," he'd complain. "Were you waiting? You could have eaten first," I'd respond. "What are you talking about? There's nothing to eat. How am I supposed to eat?" John rarely worked late and usually was home before me. I did, but he never did any housework. Housework is the woman's job, right? Oh, come on, that's old-fashioned. At that time, women were starting to be more active in society. I often heard the term career woman on TV, but John always said housework was for women. I would have liked to be a full-time housewife, but we needed the money. A modern woman had to handle both work and home. John saw things in a way that suited him, unlike the traditional controlling husband. Instead of me having freedom, it was John who often went out drinking. "If you're going to be late, at least let me know. Cut it out. It's my time. I can do what I want with it." His tone was even worse when he came home drunk. While I couldn't freely use my own time and money, John was enjoying his life, and I felt like I was getting a bad deal. I was so upset that within the first year of marriage, I thought about getting a divorce. When I spoke to my mother about it, she strictly said no, telling me that divorce was not an option. I didn't have the courage to get a divorce either, worried about what other people would think. Living together meant accepting both the good and the bad. I kept telling myself then, John, as soon as he got his paycheck, would go out drinking and was just wasting time at work. He never did any overtime or extra work, even if he had the time. He just kept going out or came straight home after work. And when he found me not at home, he'd say, "I hate it when I come home and my wife isn't there. It stresses me out to see the lights off, but sometimes I had to work late." "What's the point of a woman working overtime? Change your job," John said. He went behind my back and called my employer to get me fired. My boss, not wanting to get involved in anything strange, or maybe he wanted me gone from the start, encouraged me to resign. It became awkward to stay at the company, so I left. I quit my job, and it was so hard to find that job in the first place. Now I had to look for work again after leaving 2 companies. I wasn't even getting past the job application screenings. John, seeing me stressed, said part-time work was fine since he worked full-time. I wasn't really the career type, so I didn't dwell on the past, but I was worried if his salary alone was enough, so I took on 2 part-time jobs. I worked as a morning cleaner and a cashier at a grocery store. On days I knew John would be home late, I worked overtime at the store. When John was home, I was there. When he wasn't, I worked hard. Years passed, and I managed because I thought he needed me. I thought it was sweet that he wanted me home when he returned. A year after we got married, I gave birth to our eldest son. This apartment is too cramped. When the kid starts elementary school, he'll want his own room and might even want siblings. John said. Around that time, his mom, who was a divorced single mother, suggested moving in together. She must have felt lonely after her only child, John, got married and left home. It'll be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. We won't have to pay rent, she probably told him. I wanted some time to think, but they had already prepared a room for my son, changing the wallpaper and everything. I wanted to keep my part-time jobs, so I agreed without much thought. But I was too naive. My mother-in-law made me the target of her daily harsh comments. It's a shame for a child to have a mother working so hard. In my day, that was unthinkable. She had never worked after her divorce, relying on her parents' help to raise John. Her parents were wealthy, so money wasn't an issue. Now she lives off a modest pension and her parents' inheritance, although she spent freely on her hobbies and on John and his son. She was never generous with me. Meals were prepared for everyone but me, and no matter where they went, I was always left behind. I am thankful that she took care of my grandchild, and since she cooked for John, I didn't need to be home when he returned. You can work full-time now. Overtime's okay too, John said suddenly. Since Em's here, you can go work. I realized how selfish it was when he said he wanted someone at home. It wasn't about wanting me there, but about having someone take care of things for him. I started working temp jobs after dropping my son off at daycare. Luckily, my mother-in-law was happy to pick him up, so I could rely on her to bring him home. It was a relief not to get complaints even when I worked late. After about 12 years, my mother-in-law started acting strange. "Who are you?" "A burglar." "I know it." "John, call the police." It was me, Emma. She had developed Alzheimer's disease and often didn't recognize John or her grandson. One day, after wandering off, she had an accident and became bedridden. "It's your fault Mom got like this. You take responsibility and look after her." "How is it my fault?" "It's because you work late into the night. But you were the one who said it was okay for me to work." We couldn't stop fighting. I thought about taking my son and leaving, but I couldn't abandon my mother-in-law, so I decided to endure it. Besides, my son liked both John and his grandmother. I couldn't talk to him about it. My mother-in-law, who never accepted me as family, complained daily while I took care of her. Even when I consulted John about it, he brushed it off with one sentence: "It can't be helped. She has dementia." I quit my job and became increasingly isolated. My mother-in-law, who seemed to enjoy mistreating her daughters-in-law, didn't become kinder to me, whom she saw as a stranger. With dementia, I had hoped, but it was a pipe dream. She must have always disliked me from the start, but to my son she was still his dear grandma. I continued to care for my mother-in-law alone until she passed away. After she died and my son became independent, only John and I were left in the house. Next year, John is set to retire. I was excited about traveling and going out, just the 2 of us. But then John shocked me with something unbelievable. "It's written out for me. Just sign it and submit it yourself." He said, handing me a divorce paper, "You can tell by looking at it. You're really slow, you know. That's what was so annoying about you. I felt like I had been hit on the back of the head. I felt like I was going to collapse. Why did I do something to deserve a divorce?" "Well, if I had to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you," John said with a smirk. "I've got someone I want to marry." It turned out John had a mistress, and their affair had been going on for years. She was 22 years younger than me. "So you were cheating on me while I was taking care of your mother and raising our child?" "It seems that way," John said indifferently. I was about to explode with anger at John's casual response. While I was enduring my mother-in-law's harsh words, raising a child, and dealing with loneliness, all the while sacrificing my own desires and working hard by myself, John was fooling around with his mistress. "I wish I didn't know that you've been deceiving me all this time. I'll never forgive you." "What are you going to do about it? You can't do anything anyway," John scoffed with contempt. So you're going to divorce me and be with that woman? That's right. She's much younger and better than you. I understand. Then I'll sign the divorce papers. But just so you know, I'll be asking both of you for alimony. Fine by me? I'll pay whatever. I have my mom's inheritance. Oh, but I'm not splitting the assets, just so you know. I thought it over for a moment. I had some savings of my own, and I didn't want John or his mistress to get their hands on it. All right, alimony will do. But let's make it clear my assets are off the table then. John burst out laughing. Your money is peanuts. I don't need that. With a lawyer present, we signed the papers, agreeing not to divide the property, and we got divorced. I received $50,000 in alimony, paid in a lump sum, from my mother-in-law's inheritance. John probably wanted to start a new life with his mistress as soon as possible and cut ties with me quickly by settling with money. After the lawyer left, John said, I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement pay. You should just go to some facility. I actually did check into the facility. It wasn't because John told me to. I thought it would make my retirement years more enjoyable. The house was originally Joan's family home, and I had nowhere else to go. My sister and her husband were living in my family home, and I didn't want to impose on my son and his wife. I knew John had no savings, so splitting any assets would have been pointless. More than that, I wanted to get the divorce over with, and I was confident I could manage on my own. The inheritance from John's mother went to him, and I was content with just the alimony money. Months later, John showed up at the facility. I hadn't told him my current address. He shouldn't have known I was there. He must have hired a professional agency to find me. I wondered, what could he possibly want so badly that he had to go through all that trouble? There were other residents in the facility, so I hadn't waited outside on the terrace. When I saw John sitting on the terrace from a distance, looking around helplessly, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. What on earth did I ever see in this man to marry him? It's a mystery to me. So sorry to keep you waiting, John finally said when I approached him. What do you want? What's this all about? John confronted me, not even bothering with a greeting. I played dumb, even though I knew what had surprised him. Why did you come all of a sudden? How did you find this place? You were impossible to get in touch with. It took me a long time to find out. You didn't tell our son either, did you? He didn't know anything. Well, he has his own family now. It'd be wrong to bother them. Besides, you haven't answered my question. How did you find out about this place? I asked. A private detective. They found out for me, he admitted. I needed to talk to you about the alimony. An ex-husband can be quite useful, huh? I figured you used a professional. Which detective agency was it? I was upset about the privacy intrusion, but I stayed calm. How can someone like you afford to live in such a fancy place? John asked, surprised. After our divorce, I moved into this upscale facility. I had once hoped to enter with John for our retirement. It's not your typical nursing home. It's more like a luxury condo with a hospital attached. There's a dining hall with meals made by a nutritionist, and during the day, I have a great time with the other residents and helpers. I could be alone if I want, and someone checks on me daily to see if I'm okay. Hey, there's even an emergency button in my room. This place costs like $4 million, right? How do you have that kind of money? John asked. Actually, I've been investing for our retirement since we got married about 37 years ago. I lost my job in 1994, which drained my savings and left me panicked. Life is unpredictable. I realized saving money wasn't enough, so I started learning about investing. At first, I invested a little at a time, hoping to enjoy good food and travel with John during our retirement. Since we both worked, I used a bit of my own money to invest. I sacrificed outings with friends, fine dining, shopping, and travel. All the money I could have spent freely went into investments. After 37 years of diligent investing, I amassed a great fortune. When I told John about it, he said, "Then that money is partly mine, too." I knew he would say something like that. "Sorry, but I can't give you any of my money." "Why not? I'm your ex-husband. It should be part of my assets, too. You gave up that claim yourself, right in front of the lawyer. Have you forgotten? Damn, that's why you wanted a lawyer. You tricked me. Who has been deceiving him all this time?" John looked frustrated, his face twisted in disappointment. It felt like a waste of time to continue talking, so I urged him to leave. "No way, I'm not leaving. I'm going to live here too," he insisted. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. Soon, a security guard from the facility arrived, and I had them escort John out. It seems a resident had noticed my distress and called security. Despite his repeated attempts to visit, John's disruptive behavior eventually got him banned from the facility. Nevertheless, I was curious about why he was so desperate to see me, so I contacted my son. According to my son, John had debts. After our divorce, John planned to marry his mistress, but when she found out he had paid alimony to me, she was furious. To try to win her back, John spent a lot of money on her. Even so, she didn't marry him but continued to take his money until she left him for a younger man. "Are you dumping me after everything I've given you?" But it was too late for regrets. She left John without a second thought. She had lost interest in a penniless John. In the end, John was just a convenient source of money for her. It was probably the younger man who was her real target all along. I couldn't imagine a woman 22 years his junior seriously planning to marry someone like John. John alone believed in the marriage with his mistress, which must have been a big shock to him in the end. And John, who had squandered his parents' inheritance and was in debt, was left alone with only his house. That house is over 74 years old. It's fallen apart everywhere, but he has no money to repair it. He's still living there alone in the rundown house. My son expressed no intention of helping. Recently, a city official told him to at least repair the exterior because it was causing trouble for the neighboring houses. John lost it and caused such a scene that the police got involved. My son went to pick up his father at the police station, but told him it was the end of their relationship. "You're abandoning me too," John said while crying and begging, but his son just shrugged him off. Feeling abandoned by his son made John seem like a miserable man. Because of an incident involving the police at his house, he became disliked in the neighborhood and now spends his weekends at home alone. After updating me on John's situation, my son suggested I give him a call sometime, showing he still cared in his own way, which made me happy. Later, John himself called me. When I ignored that, he called the facility directly, showing persistence. The staff at the facility were concerned, too. I decided to answer the phone. "Just once. I just need to borrow a little money," he pleaded. "No, I'm sorry," I responded. "Don't you have a pension coming?" John was supposed to have recently retired, so I thought it was a lie that he didn't have any money. "I won't receive any of that." "Don't lie to me. You got your pension, didn't you?" It was discovered at the last minute that I had an affair and I was fired. Incredibly, John had been let go just before his retirement. It seems the affair was with a coworker, and after breaking up, she became frightened by his stalker-like behavior and reported it to the company. Ultimately, the affair was discovered by the company and he was fired without his pension. His stalking and the incident with the police were discovered too, which probably contributed to the problem. I felt no sympathy whatsoever after hearing the story. After that, I asked the facility staff to contact the police the next time John tried to reach me by phone and started sending letters instead. They began with "I want to see you again" and "I'm lonely," but eventually changed to "I need to borrow money." I think he was in really bad shape. I couldn't help but laugh at one point. I'm not sure which letter it was, but the ink was smeared. It looked like it was from tears, but I'm sure it was just water. I was amazed by such dramatics and wondered what the point was. It really is a tough life. After a year of no replies from me, The letters finally stopped. Then several years passed. I had completely forgotten about John. One day, while I was out shopping, a dirty, smelly man approached me. He was thin, with an almost entirely gray, unkempt beard. It was undoubtedly John. "Emma, isn't it?" I was shocked by how different he looked. "I finally found you. Let's start over. You're all I have," he said as he grabbed my shoulder. I felt scared. "It's me, John. You know that, right? I know who you are, but I'm a stranger to you now. Goodbye." As I tried to leave, John stepped in front of me, blocking my way. He looked at me with begging eyes. "Please come back home. I can't stand being alone in my old age. You were the one who threw me out. Remember, that's why I'm apologizing. An apology won't fix what you did. Plus, I've moved on. You should too." I tried to ignore John and leave, but he kept following me, bowing his head repeatedly. "We're divorced, John. Get over it. I was wrong. You're the most important thing to me. I finally realized that. It's too late for that now." As I tried to put distance between us, John grabbed my arm. That's when someone intervened. "Could you let go of her arm, please?" "Who are you?" "This is my husband. I remarried, and his name is Richard. He's 3 years older than me. We got close at the same care facility. When John caused trouble at the facility, it was Richard who called security for me. I heard about it from the other residents. I was drawn to Richard's thoughtfulness and kindness. He also enjoyed my company, and naturally we started spending more time together, and we decided to get married. I did wonder if remarrying at this age was wise, but then I thought, why not be happy? So we went for it. "You got remarried?" John asked, shocked. "That's right, so please stop concerning yourself with me." "Oh no," John was clearly shaken. I was anxious he might do something to Richard out of anger, but John just didn't have it in him anymore. Instead, he just collapsed there and cried. "Come on, stop it. It's embarrassing." "Shut up. Leave me alone," he cried unabashedly, while everyone watched from a distance. I thought he looked utterly pitiful. A grown man crying in the street. Was this really happening so easily, or was I being tested? "Let's go, Emma," Richard urged, and I left the scene. Since then, John hasn't shown his face to me. According to my son, John still lives in that rundown house without making any repairs. He can't manage household chores, doesn't take out the trash, and has been reported several times for the stench. My son gets the calls, and it bothers him. No matter what is said, it's no good. And my son finally lost his temper in front of a social worker. John claimed he wasn't his son. After that, John would get angry if my son tried to contact him, so the calls stopped. It seems like the authorities have given up as well, saying it's useless. He's truly a neighborhood nuisance, but it's no longer my concern. In the end, John has been abandoned by everyone and is living in isolation. "I should have never taken a mistress," John once said, as my son told me. But for me, it's not just about the mistress. It's about a lifetime of selfishness, not caring about others. He's facing the consequences now. People might regret their actions, but to go over 74 years without learning from your mistakes is just sad. John probably won't ever understand this. He has ruined his own future, and it's his job to fix it. He might not be strong enough to do it alone, but he has to try. I hope John realizes what he's done and lives the rest of his life true to himself. I'm grateful to John now. If I had kept expecting something from him, my life would have been miserable. Thanks to the divorce he wanted because of his affair, I can live my own life. I'm in touch with my son more often now. It all changed when my daughter-in-law told me not to worry. That's when I realized I had been too considerate of others. I kept my distance from my adult son, thinking I bother him. When my son told me he had disliked his grandmother and father since he was a child, I was shocked. He knew all about my mother's mistreatment and his father's affairs. I've decided to live without such worries now. My son, his wife, and my grandchildren visit often. I plan to catch up on the conversations I couldn't have with my son before. My son is a bit distant, but it's funny how he can talk naturally when the grandkids and daughter-in-law are around. Richard has been accepted by my son, and my grandkids adore him as if he were their real grandfather. We're enjoying our time together at the facility now. We have many friends there and are happy. We want to stay healthy and live long lives.